Welcome to Coffeeecontalk. Today we are welcoming Mr. Janak Nabar, who is the CEO of the Center for Technology, Innovation and Economic Research. Welcome to Coffeeecontalk, sir.
Thanks, Madhura. Hi, Siya. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Let us now get started with the interview. Siya, would you like to start off the interview?
Yeah, sure. So my first question is, given the growing emphasis of innovation in public policies and private firms, what sort of reforms do you think are required in the education sector to ensure that students can fulfill the innovation requirements of the firms that they'll go on to work with and of the Indian economy in general?
Thanks, Siya. So a couple of things which I think the education sector should definitely focus on is providing students with a multidisciplinary education as much as possible. There are days of when we had like super specialization or certain streams that people focused on. I think we need to have much more rounded students and being exposed to both the arts as well as the humanities and the sciences. So if we can have reforms which allow specialization in, even if you're taking science, more liberal arts kind of approach to education, I think that would be the first step. About the importance of having a multidisciplinary education, and the other being that more research being done in our higher education system. So a lot more collaboration between, and research funding that's should be directed towards the higher education sector, so that science and technology research can happen within the university systems also. So I could maybe qualify that a bit with giving some data around the research currently. So, if you look at national research spending for research and development, bulk of it is done by the government in autonomous R&D institutions. Then you have, which is about 51% of our total national R&D spending. 40% is performed by industry, and only 7% or 8% that's done within the higher education sector. So there's a strong need to ensure that we increase research funding and also what is performed in the higher education sector, and B, it's really ensuring that those industry academia collaborations, that I think this is something which people have talked about endlessly, but we have to revisit, not just talk about it happening, but really understand what are the barriers which really are preventing those successful collaborations. Is it an issue of institutions being too focused on publications, but not really catering to industry needs? Is it that there are issues around intellectual property? Is it that industry is not attractive because the funding amount is too small? So these are kind of actual barriers which we need to kind of identify and then try and nail them and address them.
Right, sir. Thank you for the answer. So my next question is, the COVID-19 pandemic forced humanity to develop vaccines in almost a year. Had it not been for the pandemic, we might have never discovered this incredible production capacity that we possess. In which other sectors do you think we are unknowingly operating at a suboptimal capacity? Also, is there any potential to reduce costs, both in terms of time and money in these sectors?
So I'll just take a step back. In terms of our, if you look at, the kind of research that is being performed by Indian industry, right? The structure of our industrial R&D, you'll have at the top, like it's pharmaceuticals, it's automobiles, and largely the IT sector. You'll have some, research happening in chemicals, in electronics, and if you go down further, it's like food processing and things like that. But if you look at the global stage, right, the big sectors are pharma, electronics, technology, hardware, automobiles. So India is present in some of them, but we're not present in all of them, right? In terms of our, the production capability being discovered, or our research capabilities being discovered for vaccine production, I think that's something which has been understood for a while. It's not that suddenly the pandemic kind of opened everyone's eyes to that possibility. I mean, India has been known as the pharmacy of the world, producing generic drugs. There's a lot of research happening in the pharma sector. So I think we're lucky that we had that industrial base which was able to respond very effectively and very quickly to the needs of our population, and also in the development of this vaccine. But if you look at like other sectors where there is potential, definitely you have to ask, can we do a lot more in the auto sector? There's obviously focus on EV and those kind of technologies that people are looking at. Can our auto sector, spend a lot more and focus on some of these newer technologies, which is happening. Even within the healthcare sector, can we focus on, low-hanging fruit like medical devices? Today, India imports like 70% of its medical device needs. The pandemic has shown the need for and even before the pandemic, we've known the demands on healthcare are huge in India. So is this a sector that we could really, also push for greater technology deepening in, right? So healthcare is definitely one of them. There's, as I mentioned earlier, there are global sectors in which India is present, in sectors which we're not. That offers us an opportunity to think about, can we diversify into newer sectors? Can we or deepen our presence in some of these sectors? So that's one of the ways I would really think about where the opportunities are. So the government has announced measures, for example, in semiconductors and things like that. Now, electronics is something which India does not really have a global presence in when it comes to R&D. And so we have to see whether these, kind of PLI measures or even the new announcements actually benefit in creating those opportunities, right? There's a lot more thinking that needs to be done, which, it requires thinking about financing, thinking about trade policies, tariffs, all of that. It's not just saying, okay, this is a sector we've picked, now let's start producing stuff in it. There are multiple things to think of when thinking of opportunities and growing them. So.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
My next question to you would be, what was the scenario for innovation in India like before 1991, and how did things change post-liberalization?
So I think there were a lot more restrictions pre-91. We all know about like various restrictions that were in place. Accessing technology was very difficult. Multiple licenses had to be, obtained to even purchase technology from overseas, to establish like factories here, to grow. It was very difficult. FDI obviously opened up post 91 in a big way in certain sectors, and then that's continued. So the scenario today obviously has drastically changed in that sense. I mean, India is now like, although it started perhaps in the mid 80s, but is one of the largest today, like hubs for global R&D. A lot of R&D, big R&D companies have set up R&D centers in India. You have good FDI coming in a variety of sectors. Startups have now in the last 7-8 years, and more importantly in the last 4-5 years, we've suddenly seen this uptick in the kind of startups that are emerging. So I think the sources of technology and the availability has definitely, we can see that it has changed post 91. Right? So yeah, I mean, I hope that answers some of it.
Yes, sir. So I'm going to ask the next question. It's that what, according to you, are some policies that India can adopt from around the world from promoting local innovation?
India had one of the most generous tax incentives for R&D actually. Now R&D is only one part of innovation, of course, but uh, it had like one of the most generous incentives, a weighted tax deduction of 200%. Uh, the the policy was gradually phased out because there was this belief that it wasn't really working. Um, I think we need to closely evaluate such policies, constantly thinking of different financing kind of opportunities, because ultimately for innovation, funding is going to be very critical, right? So how do we deepen at a macro level, like our capital markets, create the right kind of opportunities to ensure that we allocate finances and funding to good ideas. There are obviously constraints in the banking system with non-performing assets. Fiscally, the government perhaps is constrained because of we've had a widening deficit, and then of course the COVID, the pandemic has taken its toll. So with all these constraints, you have to think of what are newer ways of thinking of supporting initiatives. Who are the people who, how do we identify those right ideas? How do we identify the opportunities that need that kind of support? So I think that is something which we've seen a trend in venture capital financing increase. Of course, a lot of that money may be coming from overseas because of concerns about maybe what's happening in China in terms of the investments and the crackdown on the technology sector there and things like that. So that has attracted some capital into India, but we need to constantly think of what are different models of financing. I think in terms of policies that we could help to support innovation. And other policies, I mean, of course, it's trade, for example. Now, if you keep raising tariffs, and I want to really produce, I give you the example of medical device innovation, right? If we don't produce some of those key components in India today, then a lot of device manufacturers have said it's cheaper to import like a entire product than actually get these components because of the high tariff duties, and then the cost of that device does not really get reduced significantly. So you have to think of these inverted duty structures. Are they really hurting innovation? So when you think of innovation, it's multiple policies that can affect it, and we need to think of each of these in terms of if we're part of like free trade agreements or not, if we have the right financing in place or not. So there's several other policies like that we will need to think.
Thank you. And our final question for you is about startups. So as of recently, India has experienced a boom in startups. How much do you think has this changing scenario been influenced by an uptick in innovation in the Indian markets, both in the form of demand and supply? And how will these dynamics shape the future of the innovation that's happening in the country?
I think there's definitely enthusiasm for in the last 6-7 years. It's and more recently now we hear it's in your face all the time, amount of money that's come in, the number of unicorns, right? That excitement is there, that entrepreneurial spirit, all of that is being obviously being nurtured and being really pushed in a big way. 7-8 years ago, maybe it felt that, look, this is is this really going to take off? Today, like the ideas that are also emerging, I would say are not just in the services, but you're also seeing it in other domains of like deep tech and several other good ideas which perhaps maybe a few years ago, we didn't realize the potential for that existed, perhaps, right? Having said that, if you look at the trends in like financing and the trends in the IPOs and things that have happened recently, you'll find many of them are in the services sector, right? And that is obviously like a lot of things happening in service innovation or that sector. But the question is also, what are the kind of startups that are emerging, and can they help really grow our manufacturing sector also, right? So today maybe it's easier to fund like a services startup than maybe a manufacturing startup. The amount of capital needed upfront, the gestation period for it, all of that, right? Like I mean, I keep coming back to medical device. That's one of my like favorite examples and things that I really like. Often investors would shy away because at critical points when you have to test the equipment, you need to get all the approvals in place, the regulatory requirements, all of that. So manufacturing startups definitely need a lot more upfront investment, and it's perhaps easier to get services startups off the ground. So it raises the questions of the kind of startups that we want to eventually also develop. There's nothing wrong in one or the other, but the financing right now, I think, would be going largely towards things like online retail, e-commerce, those kind of areas of the startup sector. Whereas someone who wants to genuinely do something in engineering and manufacturing may find it difficult, unless they like experienced people who have a track record and I've worked in a company for 30 years, suddenly decide they realize there's a spin-off opportunity, they set something up, people will fund them for sure. But I think newer ideas, it really depends on who comes up with those for the manufacturing sector especially. So
thank you. It was fascinating to know about all these things, and thank you so much for being a part of Coffeeecontalk.
Thank you for having me, Madhura and Siya. Thanks very much, and look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you.